Bread has been around for thousands of years and it's really quite a simple food, and it can be as simple as just water and flour. However, nowadays it is quite highly processed, and the reason for this is because traditionally bread wouldn't last longer than about a day before it went stale. And so the food industry have been working very hard in the last century or so to be able to extend the shelf life so we can actually have it throughout the week and not have to bake it every single day. They've also worked to increase the taste, or at least change the taste of it, and so they've manipulated the flour and added certain ingredients into it to make it slightly different, which is now why when you go to a supermarket you have a whole variety of different types of bread, but also if you look at the ingredients it's actually quite a long list, considering it should really be quite a simple type of bread. And so the problem with all this is that it's generally made it less healthy and not as good for us. However, if you get the right type of bread and you know what you're looking for, it can actually be generally okay for your health and a nice addition to your diet. And so in this video, I'm going to review 4 types of common breads. That's going to be white bread, brown bread or wholemeal bread, sourdough bread, and sprouted bread such as Ezekiel bread. And I'm going to go through what you should look for and what you should avoid, which ones are healthy, which ones are healthier, and which ones you definitely want to stay away from. And make sure you stick to the end to find out the best type of flour to look for as well in the bread, which one is more healthy. So let's go straight into it. Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Steven, for those of you that don't know me, and this video I'm going to be talking bread. It's a big subject and it's one that I've been on a bit of a journey recently to really hone down on getting the best type of bread, because actually it can be a bit of a minefield. So hopefully with this video it can simplify things a little bit more, so when you go to the supermarket or you go to your bakery you know what to look for and what to buy. Now to start off with, you do have to remember that bread is a carbohydrate, and so you do want to have it in a small amount in your diet. You certainly want to make sure it's the minority of the calories that you're having, but I think provided you're getting the right type of bread, it's not a bad thing to have in your diet, and it makes certain food taste really nice. So I do like it as an addition, but I keep it as low as possible. It is of course also high in gluten, so if you are gluten intolerant or celiac, obviously you want to stay away from it. I know some people, although they are intolerant to it, they can kind of get through it and they eat it because they enjoy it. I would say if your body is not agreeing with it, you're probably better to stay away from it because it's probably not doing your gut any favors. Now I'm going to start with probably what's fairly obvious, what you should avoid, and that is white bread. White bread is basically the wholemeal bread that has been refined and stripped of the fiber and the nutrients. Why that's a problem is because you end up with a bread that is simply just calories and has no nutritional content in it at all. It also, because it has no fiber, it has a glycemic index that is pretty much the same as sugar, which basically means that you're going to be spiking your blood sugar in a similar way that you're going to be spiking it if you had pure sugar. And this is bad because high blood sugar spikes, and a lot of them throughout the day, and a lot of variability in that, is associated with poor disease and worse health outcomes. So this is one of the main reasons you want to avoid it, but also, particularly nowadays, they actually add in extra sugar. And the reason why they do this, partly because of the taste, but also because it helps the bread rise quicker, which can make the bread cheaper. And they also add in fat, often in the form of seed oils. And the reason they do this is because they can then decrease the water content and maintain the moisture in the bread. And if they can decrease the water, then they can extend that shelf life. The problem is that often it's seed oils that they use, and they are highly processed in most cases, using chemicals like hexane, which comes from crude oil, using high heat, deodorizing the seeds, etc. So it's one of the things that I try to look out for, is to avoid bread with added sugar, and ideally with seed oils, which to be honest is not an easy task. But the main thing is avoid white bread. Now, how do you make this worse is by adding in a sugar filling like jam, because then what you have is basically something that's It's closer to a dessert than it is to a meal. And that's fine, it's fine to have, but just don't think that you're having a nutritious meal. And don't really think that you're having a meal, because your body's not really getting anything except for just calories. So this is really a disaster metabolically long term, and you really want to keep this to a minimum, or ideally eliminate it altogether. So what is a better bread? And there are a few different types that are generally quite good, I think, and there's some that's better than others, and I'm going to go through that. So wholemeal then is going to be better. So you're taking the natural grain that hasn't been stripped of the nutrients and fiber. Why this is more healthy is because if you've got the fiber alongside the grain, it means you can slow down that sugar transit to your blood, which means you're not going to get these high blood sugar spikes, which are associated with poorer health. And so in that regard, it's going to be metabolically more healthy for you. It also has more nutrition, which then gives you more of a reason to actually have it in the first place, because I think any food that you have in your body really should be providing you with some nutrition, ideally, not just calories on its own. Now in this bread and all the others that I'm going to go through, you still have to watch out for added sugar, because it doesn't need to be in there. And you also want to ideally watch out for seed oils. Now the problem about this type of bread is it contains phytic acid. This is the same with oats. And the reason why this is a problem is because it is termed a anti-nutrient. So it basically interferes with the absorption of the nutrients that you're taking in. So how can you decrease this? And that is through the next two types of bread that I'm going to go through. And the first one here is going to be sourdough bread. And sourdough bread is bread that has been fermented. So instead of using yeast to speed up the rising of the bread, they've let it rise for longer, letting the bread, the flour ferment, which then gives it more of a natural rise. But because it requires more time to rise, it also has more time to break down this phytic acid, which then means you're going to have less of it in it, which then makes the bread more nutritious, because you're going to you're going to be able to absorb more of the nutrients from the meal that you're going to have. This type of bread's been made for centuries, and it's becoming more and more common and trendy in today's society, and that is the main reason why it's healthy. Another reason though, because it's fermented, you have then some of the good bacteria that is then good for your gut. So they are the two main reasons to be having sourdough. Again, watch out for added sugar and seed oils, and ideally make sure that the grain that they're using is wholemeal, or another type of grain like rye is also really healthy, and I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail at the end. Sourdough bread does spike your sugar levels less than wholemeal, and wholemeal spikes it less than white bread. But what spikes it even less is the one I'm about to go through now, and that is sprouted bread. This is basically a bread where the grains have been soaked over a period of time until the grains start to sprout. And because of this soaking process, it reduces that phytic acid, that anti-nutrient, which then leads to more absorption of the nutrients that you're taking in the same way that we would soak our oats, that will decrease that phytic acid. So there's benefits in doing it with the oats. You can do it in the same way with the grains, and it also is going to decrease the amount of gluten in it, so it makes it more digestible, and it has one of the lowest glycemic indexes out of all the other types of bread. Now, one of the most common types of sprouted bread, and one bread that is regarded as the most healthy out there, although it is debatable, and that is Ezekiel bread. And that is very interesting, because the reason why it's called Ezekiel bread is because it comes from the Bible, from the book of Ezekiel in the Old Testament. And God basically tells them this recipe that we still use today. And let me just read this short verse here. It says, "Take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and spelt, put them in a storage jar and use them to make bread for yourself." So they're using a whole variety, not just grains, but also legumes, which is going to increase that protein, increase the nutrients in the bread that you're making. And then they soaked it in a storage jar, which is going to decrease that phytic acid, the gluten. It's going to make it more digestible and therefore more healthy. So lastly, what is the best type of flour? Well, there's only one that I would really say to avoid, and that's going to be the white flour, just because of the reasons I already went through. It's very close to sugar. Wholemeal flour is the one that's traditionally used. It's not a bad one. It at least has some fiber and some nutrients. Now, other types out there that are becoming more common are actually even more healthy, mainly because they have less gluten and more fiber, more nutrients, and that's really what we want in bread and generally in food. And so grains like spelt and rye, as just two examples, are generally going to be actually more healthy than having the wheat flour, the traditional wheat flour that we have. Now you do have to remember that bread isn't a superfood. It doesn't give you a huge amount of nutrients or a huge amount of fiber even. If you're looking for those two things, there are better foods out there. But if you want to have bread, if you like bread, then try and go for the latter three that I went through. That's going to be much better for your health than particularly the first one. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the benefits of sourdough is it has good impact on your gut health. And if you want to find out why the gut is so important, so foundational in your health, and how you can further improve this, then I highly recommend that you check out my video that will pop up in just a second just here. But just before it does, don't forget that if you go in the description of this video, you can get 10% off Vivo Barefoot minimalist shoes that I wear every single day, 15% off Fuzzy, which is a natural deodorant that doesn't have any harmful chemicals that I use every single day, £10 off your first bag of coffee, which is an organic, super healthy coffee that again I have every single day, and 10% off Athanaze, which is a superfood specifically formulated for men that I also have every single day. Thank you for watching. I'll see you either on this video or my next, so don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.